Hi, everybody.
All they had first. Striking. No air conditioning.
We're gonna go ahead and give folks a minute to sign on, and then we'll go get started.
It's really fighting the urge not to admit when people, I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, anyone's action.
Folks in the waiting room.
Yeah, it's just such a test.
You
It's
can
like,
do it.
okay,
They'll
do you
be
say
doubly
half the
admitted.
candy bar for later, or do you eat it now? I usually fail that test. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and give us about another minute for all of our presenters to join. Background noise on my end. But let me pull up our
The agenda.
reminders here. All right, so you should be able to see the intro slide. Can I get a thumbs up? Yes, great, okay. So I've got our agenda up here, but just
So Karen has the agenda up on the screen for y'all to check out.
Yeah.
and just for a very brief introduction, hi everybody, my name is Karen Young. I am a project manager with the Solano Resource Conservation District. The RCD has been helping coordinate the Solano Fire Safe Council meetings for the last 11 months, 12 months. And we are really excited for this meeting to feature a discussion on prescribed fire topics. We have been getting a lot of questions about prescribed fire, especially with neighboring fire safe councils or neighboring counties establishing prescribed burn associations. And with increasing recognition of its tool, of its use as a tool for land management, reducing wildfire risk, promoting cultural goals. We've got a good time here today to talk about a number of different facets of this topic. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris Rose.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, that was a great start up to this meeting. This is a meeting that I'm really excited about. It's something I've been involved in to a certain degree through my past as a habitat restoration practitioner. But I would say that was in the old days, basically 20 years and back, when we would just go out when we needed to do a habitat restoration project and we needed fuel reduction, we would go burn off an area, and then in order to reduce thatch and for other reasons. And if we wanted to build a fire break, we would basically create black lines as that fire break. But it just seemed like back then things were a little less volatile. So, but now that I'm at the Solano RCD, we still have that desire on habitat restoration projects to actually have that tool, a prescribed fire. Of course, there's a bigger story to prescribed fire on a larger scale as far as protecting neighborhoods and cities and trying to reduce catastrophic damage of wildfire. But an example of this is with Dixon, the city of Dixon, and also the fire district. We burned a 40-acre site 3 years ago at Ponce, a detention basin. And when I said we were allowed to watch. It's basically that is one thing I also realized is as things got more coordinated and organized, we were watching more. So this is a really awesome opportunity because the Solano RCD has a desire from a restoration standpoint, and now from a wildfire prevention and catastrophic wildfire prevention standpoint of seeing how we can work in our community in Solano County to be able to use fire as a tool in partnership with neighboring counties and also all the different groups within Solano County, and explore it and see where it goes and see if we can actually incorporate it into fire management in the future. So I'm excited for this.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, sure.
All right, our first presenter this evening is going to be Tori Norville, but before we get to that, I was reminded that we skipped, apologies, we skipped our chat box introductions. So just for our purposes in keeping an attendance list for these meetings, if you can please put in the chat box your name, affiliation, and if you have not been getting our emails, your email address, please. Thank you. And I'll bring up now Tori Norville.
All right, I'm gonna work on getting my screen shared right now. Hang on. Share. Thinking, there we go.
Looks good. There you go. You're on.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, my name is Tori Norville. I am with UC Cooperative Extensions. I cover Sonoma, Napa, and Marin counties. However, because there's only like 4 or 5 of us, we kind of moonlight in other counties, such as what I'm doing tonight. So I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of some of the benefits that prescribed fire can give us in California, and just kind of talking about benefits of fire in general. The first thing I want to talk about is just the fact that California is a disturbance. Our ecosystems are disturbance driven. And so California has a lot of different disturbances, bugs, diseases, pests, fire, drought, wind, snow, storm damage. And then there's also this human disturbance factor to it too. And so all the disturbances that we have in California give us the forests and ecosystems that we have today that we're looking at. Usually when an ecosystem to withstand and recover quickly from different conditions or disturbances, whereas resistance is kind of like resisting death. And so what we really want is these resilient ecosystems to kind of be able to, yeah, they can take a little bit of a hit, but their ecosystem functions are still there. So they still have wildlife habitat. They can still filter water for us. They still have the capacity to grow and sequester carbon for us, things like that. We still want those ecosystem services to be functioning after a disturbance goes through. So very basic, what fire is at its core, it's a chemical reaction between fuel, oxygen, and an ignition source or heat, which produces a flame. The flame then produces smoke and more heat to feed back into that cycle for flames and fire. When we talk about fire and ecosystems, we look at wildland fire or even prescribed fire. We have this wildland fire triangle down here with topography, weather, and fuel being the 3 pillars that drive that fire behavior. Fuel is the one that we can really manage and manipulate. We can't really manipulate topography or weather. So when we look at California and fire, just as that disturbance that we're going to look at tonight, you can really see that California has a lot of adaptations to handle fire. So a lot of our plant species have fire adaptations. So redwoods, oaks, and a lot of our like chaparral, chamise, manzanita species, They can all resprout right after a fire. A lot of our trees, oaks, pines, some firs, redwoods, sequoias, they all have this really thick bark to withstand some of that heat. And then some species just like to self-combust with everything else around them, so that way they can be the first ones into a site after that fire. That is also a fire adaptation. But it's also really important to remember that Native American burning is a part of this history of fire in California. They learned watching fires that happen naturally and learned to manipulate that across the landscape for their benefits. So what is prescribed fire? It's intentionally setting fire on a landscape to achieve certain goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives can include restoration, maintaining ecosystem habitats, not wildland, but firefighter safety, the list goes on. Whatever your goals and objectives are, you can utilize prescribed fire to help achieve some of them. So there's a couple different variations of fire variations where you can use fire to help you on the landscape. The first one is more in like forest ecosystems. I know you guys in Solano are more like oak woodland and grasslands, but prescribed fire after thinning in forests has been really useful, like in the Sierras and what we're seeing here on the coast. We'll go in and thin an area, take out some of the density, create canopy gaps, create space between things, and then there's still that woody debris and material on the ground after we do those thinnings that you can come in, do a light prescribed fire. And there's a lot of studies showing that the wildland fire response, so a wildfire, will have a low severity to medium severity instead of this high severity fire, which is what we want. We want that low and medium severity. Prescribed fire is also really good for range improvement. There's been a lot of studies showing that it increases the quality and quantity of forage in a rangeland, and it's also really good for invasive species management. I will put the caveat in there that if you're going to use prescribed burning for invasive species management, you are going to be on a very aggressive and intensive burn cycle for a couple years, and you are going to impact your native species because of that. But the research shows that the native species do come back after the fact. I'm more of a forest and woodland person, so that's about my extent of knowledge for rangeland. If you have questions, I can point you to people who can talk about that better. And then I know that we're going to hear from CAL FIRE about this a little bit more, at least their aspect of prescribed fire. But I did want to kind of give a shout out and point out that we can use prescribed fire to help maintain shaded field breaks that we do, or other different projects that we have going on. And then I really like this idea with the roadside burning. CAL FIRE's Lake Napa unit did a VMP, it looks like, of where they just burned like 50 feet off of the road. And that will mitigate a lot of like chain dragging starts. And if someone has to pull over to the side of the road, that the grass touches their the hot underside of their vehicle, that would be mitigated through this work that CAL FIRE did. So with all those various uses of prescribed fire, there's a lot of beneficial uses or benefits to the ecosystems. The first one would be germination conditions for regeneration. So this again goes back to that a lot of our plant species are fire adapted, and these are part of being fire adapted. Oaks, sequoias, a lot of pines need bare mineral soil in order for their seeds to actually germinate and sprout up little baby trees. And having a fire come through and just clear out the litter and all the ground stuff, take away the competition from grasses and forbs and all that stuff, really allows the trees to kind of get a one-up over all this stuff for a minute and establish and put down roots. We also have species with serotinous cones. Serotinous cones are just a cone that needs heat in order to open. And so that low to moderate fire severity will come through and open up the cones and allow the trees to, or the seeds to take root. And then this is kind of speculation, correlation. There's nothing really backing it, but we in the redwoods are kind of wondering if smoke triggers a cone crop. We've watched over the last couple of years, just seeing cones come through after we had a lot of smoke the summer before. We're not sure if this is just a weird coincidence. Maybe it might be a drought thing. We're not real sure what's going on there, but it could be that some species need smoke in order to trigger a cone crop. More ecological benefits is to reduce tree density. Historically, a lot of our forests look like this picture on the left, with bigger trees, lots of space in between the trees, open. And now a lot of our forests kind of look like this on the right, where we have a lot more trees, but they're really close together. And so by reducing the tree density, number one, we reduce competition between the trees. So they have more available water and nutrients, and then they just have space to grow. They're not kind of packed in there like sardines. They can kind of grow and get bigger. So we can use fire to kind of help keep that density low, or create that reduction in density over time. With kind of that reducing the density and getting rid of competition, it also cleans up pests, diseases, and invasives. We kind of touched about invasives with the rangeland slide, but we have a lot of pests and diseases in our forest and rangeland systems and oak woodlands. And basically, fire just kind of sanitizes things. So if a tree or shrub is infected with a disease or a pathogen, or even bugs, you can burn all that material and kill the bugs, reduce the spore population, or reduce the pathogen from moving from tree to tree. And then we can also just maintain ecosystems. So a lot of times we'll get encroachment where certain ecosystems kind of start to merge together. So like grass to shrubland, or Doug fir encroachment on oak woodlands. And so we can use prescribed fire to kind of maintain the ecosystem that we want there. So if you have Doug fir encroachment into oak woodland, we can use prescribed fire to kind of reduce the amount of Doug fir that's in that oak woodland and keep them back from coming in and taking over. The same can be said for rangelands where you have shrubs kind of encroaching. You can kind of use fire to push it back, or the opposite if you have grasses moving into rangelands. I'm just going to briefly touch on prescribed burn associations because I think Bailey's going to talk about them more, but prescribed burn associations are basically just community-based burning efforts, and they allow the landowner or the community to kind of take charge of that management of the land, which is really cool because a lot of times what we've been seeing in the past is prescribed burn has been put into like government organizations or something else, which is fine. I think everyone should burn. Like, I don't care who's burning, but it's also really cool to just see communities kind of burn too. If you want more information about PBAs, Bailey's going to give us a talk on that, but also this website down here, California PBA, is a great resource. They have lots of training videos and just good resource to kind of peruse around when you get a minute. And I think we're doing questions at the end after everybody's talked. So that's my contact information. I'm happy to answer questions anytime. I know I'm one of those people who always have questions after the fact. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tori. And yeah, we will prioritize questions later on. But just for an update, I'm going to bring up our agenda up here again. Our next presenter, Miguel Watson, a battalion chief with CAL FIRE, just got off an overnight fire. So he will be around for questions a little bit later, but we'll hold off on presenting for now. And with the conditions that are going on out there, the fire is not at all surprising. So we're going to actually, if there are questions for Tori, we do have a minute to take those. All right, we can go ahead and keep moving on. So bit of an early, a bit of a shift ahead into the schedule, but our next presenter is Damon Snow, Fire Marshal with Yochadihi Wintun Nation Fire Department. He's going to be talking about their experience with prescribed fire and add more insight to the conversation. So Damon, I'll bring you up here.
Wonderful. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. All right, well, thank you so much. True honor to be here. You know, obviously Tori did an absolutely amazing job highlighting the prescribed burns. And it's very reminiscent, especially when you start looking at the cultural burning practices of yesteryear. So when you look at a traditional prescribed burn, a lot of those similarities are pretty physical and similar in nature. Even the application of fire sometimes. And so most tribal practitioners usually try to do some kind of traditional practice of actually starting the fire themselves with dried wormwood or cattails or even tule to actually spread the fire. But I've been on several cultural burns, and sure enough, when you look at it, they mirror very similar to our current tactics that we use for prescribed fire. So, and physical acts of laying down the fire are very similar from tribal nations to tribal nations that I've been able to witness. Obviously, if you notice those similarities that there, also correlate with the prescribed burns. So not only for fuel reductions in around like housing sites, it could be used for fuel reduction of weed species if timed correctly. You can also promote that healthier landscape and make it that landscape more in balance or in tune. We also use it for to attract and promote wildlife in the area. Not only is it ease of access to go ahead and gain access to these particular lands when you actually thin and remove and burn off a lot of this biomass, this material, but it also allows the wildlife to actually gain access to those areas just the same. And then if you are, a lot of tribal nations are harvesting a collection of medicinal plants, or for instance, traditional basket weaving materials, or even just the acorns. You'd be surprised at where you burn specific landscapes, and then you come back in the next cycle, the next season, and you'll actually have a more bountiful harvest. Same in concept when Tori was talking about pest management. So cultural burning practices can easily go ahead and start having that the discussion about reducing of overall pests and management in the particular environment. And then of course, burning plant species for harvesting of those materials like I was talking about. This is a great example that I took pictures of over in the El Dorado County area, where we went ahead and collected a bunch of the acorns. And if you notice, you have the typical hole that's located on there where the Warville got in. And then you look at some of the healthier varieties that we went ahead and collected earlier in the season. And you can actually see on the left-hand side, that image was out of a collection site that we actually did a cultural burn the year before. So you can actually not only gain access to the acorns, but you can also have a higher yield that's there because it burned off a lot of that duff and the heavy layers. And this particular site had roughly about 11 inches of duff and material that we were able to burn and remove. And then sure enough, we were able to actually get a more bountiful harvest that was there. And then this is a great example. Unfortunately, I do not know who actually went ahead and created these. And this was actually during a prescribed burn, or excuse me, a cultural burn that we had over at Yolo County. But when it comes to materials such as tule, it can be burned to reduce the overabundance of the decay material, but it can also be used to increase the yield and harvesting, especially when it comes to creation of individual materials that you want to use for your weavings. And then you see on the historic image, and Tori had one that was just exactly the same. The historic image shows the conditions of the forest and that ecosystem. And if you notice that density of that material in that landscape, it's a stark contrast that you see, present day with the overabundance of fuels that are choking out our ecosystems. A lot of that sunlight can't obviously go to the ground, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, the condition and the amount of material between the tree species is just definitely proliferated. It's really high and dense. And then you look at the stark reality, what we had, obviously in yesteryear, and the conditions that are there, not only for bark beetles, but also pests jumping from tree to tree, but also an overabundance of certain species. And so when cultural burns, it could be a magnitude of different reasons why you're doing the cultural burn. From, like I said, on those highlights, could be fuels reduction, could be to go ahead and burn off, like for instance, red bud to create more straight stays to be able to create for weaving techniques. So it really, truly, honestly depends on how the cultural burn is starting and what your overall tactics are going to be. And this one was taken up, this one particular image was promoting for that strategy was to go ahead and burn off these Oakland savannas and these individual grasslands that are there. And fire can be used as just like anything else. It's just a tool that you have available to you. Sometimes it's going to be advantageous with early season burning where something is going to be receptive to burn while a vast majority of the landscape would not be receptive to burn. And it all depends and the target species that you're going to be able to do. This particular burn was located up in Northern California over at Robinson Rancheria. And so they were trying to burn off this material up and around the oaks to do a more bountiful harvest for the acorns for the next season. But you can also notice on the next slide that you have the characteristics between a traditional cultural burn and a prescribed burn are almost identical when you start looking at them. There's subtle nuances that are there, but the look and feel could be very similar to prescribed burn. In fact, oftentimes the tribal practitioners will ask for assistance when it comes to liaisons from the state through BIA, BLM, could be for CAL FIRE and US Forest Service. So the equipment as well as the training can vary magnitude-wise. And also there's oftentimes a lot of tribal nations from other different nations that actually help to participate in the actual overall burning. If you ever have an opportunity to actually not only attend, here are a couple of the links, but also the wonderful dedication of the magnitude of people that were helped to promote the cultural burning practices, but also help on the countless hours to go ahead and actually put on these events. Between the amazing work with the Yurok and the Kuruk tribe, Greenville, Robinson Rancheria, people like Margot Robbins, Bill Tripp, Danny Manning, Beth Rose Middleton Manning. All of those people have done absolutely amazing work. And if you ever do have an opportunity to go ahead and not only burn or follow these individual links, I would highly recommend that you take up on that opportunity. It is truly amazing because every cultural burn is 100% unique, as well as what their overall objectives are. And if you have any questions, feel free. You can always, I'll put all my information in the link and you can always feel free to contact me.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to pause for a minute in case there are questions. All right. And as mentioned, we do have time for questions at the end of our meeting. So go ahead and let those percolate. Up next, we will be hearing from Kenny Doss with Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. He is a senior air quality specialist with them and here to talk about the air quality aspects of prescribed fire.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. All right, let's see if I can get my screen going here. Okay, let me see if I can switch this. Hang on, let's see. All right, can people see that? It's probably on presenter mode that you all can see, huh?
It is on presenter mode.
Okay, let me see if I can
The
switch
user
this.
interface with that switch is just the worst.
Darn it. Let's see. See if I can do this. Bear with me here, everyone. Can you see this, the proper screen now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, thank you, everyone. My name's Kenny Doss. I'm with the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. Been working at the Air District for about 9 years now. And in addition to managing an open burning program that we have, I also am the air quality inspector for the Vacaville, Dixon, Winters portion of our district. So there's any sort of inspections that need to be investigated, I am the person who serves those areas, and I am happy to be here tonight to discuss the air quality side of prescribed burning. We'll get moving here. Okay, so the first slide, just as a reminder, the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District jurisdiction includes Yolo County, as well as the northeastern portion of Solano County. So that's roughly our Vacaville, Dixon, Rio Vista area. Folks that reside in the Fairfield, Suisun City, Vallejo, and Benicia area of Solano County would be included in Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Tried to tailor our presentation tonight to include all folks in the county, but just bear in mind that there may be some Bay Area air quality specific requirements or specifications that you might need to follow if you are in the Bay Area portion of Solano County. So just an overall view of the Air District and prescribed burning. Really the goal at the Air District is to support prescribed burning as much as we can to have folks achieve land management objectives that they desire in our community. Of course, we would always advocate for the zero emission or no emission option to preserve air quality, but the Air District also recognizes that there are benefits to prescribed burning. And our goal is to really make sure that we support folks in the county as much as possible to achieve these goals that folks have. The district and the state do have rules and regulations that pertain to prescribed burning. And so we're trying to have these prescribed burns be conducted in a manner that achieves various objectives for land managers, but also preserves air quality and minimizes emissions as much as possible. This slide speaks to the different types of prescribed burning, but what I really want to focus on is that from an air quality perspective, prescribed burning should achieve a specific objective. I think the public perception for prescribed burning sometimes is that people get to burn whenever they want, wherever they want, as much as they want. And that's really not the case. We really try to work with our land managers to have their burns fit the prescription that they have, meet the objectives that they're trying to achieve, while also having the air quality piece in mind. And we have staff, including myself, that are dedicated to making sure that various air quality rules, regulations, and prescriptions are followed to make sure that we're preserving air quality while at the same time achieving these land management objectives. Just to kind of throw around some thoughts as to the various prescribed burn projects that the district has worked on. We've worked with CAL FIRE to conduct burning along Highway 128 west of Winters, but just some other examples might include removing invasive grass species to promote native grass species, so a habitat restoration type project for plant matter. Other projects that we've been involved in is removal of vegetation for game habitat restoration as well. So we've conducted that down in the Rio Vista area in years past. And then there's also the aspect of prescribed burning that might entail establishment of agricultural land on previously uncultivated land as well. And so there's just there's different prescribed burn objectives that are possible. This slide is just supposed to kind of give folks the idea of what are the different types of prescribed burns that the district could allow in the future. This is a list of the requirements that the district has roughly for conducting prescribed burning. Really some of the biggest things about this is just to make sure that if folks are interested in prescribed burning, that they're trying to contact the district as early and often as possible in the process so that we can have good communication with the land manager to make sure that the burn is eligible for prescribed burning per our rules and regulations, and that they're going through the proper notification and submittal processes through our system to make sure that they're on track for conducting the prescribed burns when planned. One of the biggest aspects of the requirements that air districts may require is the submittal of what's called a smoke management plan. For our district, you have to submit that within or at least 7 days prior to the burn, but we'll speak a little bit more to what that smoke management plan looks like. But there are some administrative steps that need to be followed as part of the prescribed burn program at our air district. This would be similar, likely similar at Bay Area or other air districts that you may conduct prescribed burning in as well. To speak about the PFERS system, or what's called the Prescribed Fire Information Reporting System. This is basically the air district or air quality repository that's operated by the California Air Resource Board, but operated by the air districts throughout California to approve and review smoke management plans, as well as review and approve ignition authorizations and compile completed ignition reports after burning is completed. If anyone's interested about prescribed burns that are conducted throughout California, you can log on to PFERS and then set a date range, and you can look at all the prescribed burns that are conducted throughout California. It's kind of interesting. It also kind of gives you a feel for what agencies are conducting various prescribed burns throughout California. If you click on the little icon on the map, it'll give you a little bit of information in terms of when the prescribed burn was approved, how many acres it entails, and all that stuff. The last thing I wanted to speak to as far as PFERS goes is that the PFERS system basically allows air districts, like I said, to review these smoke management plans that are submitted to us. I want to give folks some idea as to what to expect for these smoke management plans that might be submitted to an air district if you are interested in prescribed burning. These are sort of more of the complicated parts of what a smoke management plan might entail. But some of the important parts that we want to highlight is smoke management plans require folks to be mindful of smoke sensitive areas, how you're contacting the public when you're conducting prescribed burning. We ask that a fuel loading or an estimated emissions quantity is sort of calculated prior to the burns, that we have an idea of how much emissions are actually going in the air when these burns are occurring. I wouldn't call it simple, but I wouldn't call it super complex either. The one thing that I think this really sort of highlights, though, is that the prescribed burns that are conducted by the air district and approved, and we work with the land managers, they really are attaining specific objectives. And it is a very thoughtful process to go through, okay, what's the target, say, wind speed or wind direction for a particular burn? What's the target mixing height for a particular burn that might occur so that we don't impact folks that are downwind of smoke sensitive areas? We work closely with the land managers to try and put together a smoke management plan that really truly manages the smoke from these burns. The expectation is that when these burns occur, that they are meeting the prescription that's encapsulated in the smoke management plans, so that we're minimizing air pollution in the communities that we all live in. So that concludes my presentation. The one thing that I'll kind of finish with at the end here is that the Air District really wants to promote the prescribed burns that are in Yolo as well as Solano County in our jurisdiction. So if folks have inquiries, questions, concerns, we want to be a resource for everyone. And so you can feel free to contact me if there are any questions or thoughts about prescribed burning in our area. But we want to be a resource to folks to achieve as much of this prescribed burning in the county as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. All right, I'm gonna pause for a minute in case there are any questions for Kenny. All right. And all of this information is going to be available in the chat box as well, and we'll be having additional time for questions at the end, as I mentioned. And also, if you were keeping an eye on the chat box throughout Kenny's presentation, the PFERS map and Air Quality Management District links are available in the chat box there. Up next, we've got Bailey Adams. She is a project manager with the Yolo County Resource Conservation District, and responsible for their fire projects. So I've got Bailey up here. You ready?
I am. Let's see how I do with the screen share. But in presenter mode.
Looks good on this end.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Bailey Adams. Like Karen said, I am a project manager with the Yolo County Resource Conservation District, and I'm also the coordinator for the Yolo Prescribed Burn Association. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been up to since we formed earlier this year. So first, some details about the PBA. The Yolo County Resource Conservation District received grant funding in June of 2022 from CAL FIRE's Forest Fire Prevention Program. This funding is being used to support my position as coordinator to lead the PBA, also to recruit local landowners, land managers, and community members, acquiring tools and equipment needed to implement prescribed burns, educating local residents about prescribed fire, including conducting live fire trainings, supporting training to build local technical capacity, and hiring a California certified burn boss to assist with burn plan writing and the live fire training. The benefits of prescribed burn associations include being able to offer a more flexible approach to prescribed burning than agency-led burns. They can have a loosely organized leadership team that helps get prescribed burns completed while avoiding some of the red tape that sometimes stalls other prescribed burn projects. And they have the unique ability to adapt to landowner management goals and can help expedite the permitting process, which can be difficult to navigate for landowners who are new to prescribed fire. Next up, I'm going to talk about what the Yolo PBA has done since we formed. Some of our accomplishments include that we've held a series of meetings about a variety of prescribed fire topics. Our first meeting was the Yolo PBA kickoff in February of this year. We've held monthly PBA meetings following that and have attended a variety of community meetings like this one to inform the community about the PBA. We've worked with legal counsel to develop liability and membership documents. We've created outreach materials and signed up community members for PBA membership. We have ongoing collaboration and communication with the CAL FIRE Sonoma Lake Napa unit, local fire departments, and the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. Lastly, the PBA held its first prescribed burn, which was done for rangeland improvement on a private ranch in Capay last month. This was a successful 27-acre burn with over 60 volunteers from the community, landowners, local fire agencies, and CAL FIRE. I want to touch briefly on liability and environmental compliance. These are the two topics that I get the most questions about in regards to prescribed burning. So California is a simple negligence state, which means you are legally responsible for harm if reasonable care was not taken. You are liable if you do not demonstrate due diligence in preparing for the burn and staying within the burn prescription. Reasonable care can include things like conducting a site visit and following preparation guidelines, having a burn boss write or approve your burn plan, possessing all of the required burn and smoke permits, and following commonly understood guidelines for planning a burn. With prescribed fire, liability primarily falls on the landowner. This responsibility can be shared through transferred liability, through an agreement to share liability with a burn boss, or with an agreement for an insured burn boss to take on primary liability. There have also been recent changes in legislation that impact liability in regards to prescribed fire. Those include Senate Bill 332. That bill establishes that a landowner is not liable for paying suppression and investigation costs of a prescribed burn if the burn plan was reviewed and approved by a California certified burn boss or cultural practitioner. Additionally, Senate Bill 926 establishes a prescribed fire claims fund. This is a $20 million fund of public funds to help cover the costs of third-party damages from escaped prescribed fires. There's a lot of different ways to address liability of prescribed fire, but the best way is to just mitigate risk. So ways that the YOLO PBA have addressed liability is by having all parties sign liability waivers. We demonstrate due diligence through proper permitting and preparation, having a burn plan, working with a California certified burn boss, and having close partnerships with fire and air quality agencies. We also ensure that we're in compliance with SB 332 and plan to take advantage of the prescribed fire claims fund in our future projects. And as legislation continues to change surrounding prescribed fire, we're closely monitoring any legal developments. Environmental compliance for prescribed burning relates to the California Environmental Quality Act. CEQA is a process, not a permit, and all projects undertaken by a public agency or funded using public funds are subject to CEQA. So since the YOLO RCD is using state funding from CAL FIRE to implement prescribed burns, CEQA is applicable and we are complying with all regulations. The way that we do that is by conducting a review of the California Natural Diversity Database to ensure that no rare plants or animals are located within the burn site, and by consulting with relevant tribal entities to ensure that we don't impact cultural resources. We also file a notice of
Bailey, I'm sorry.
No problem.
There.
No worries. So we also use we file a notice of exemption using a categorical exemption. For the one that we've used so far is for minor alterations to land. That means that when we plan a burn, we plan accordingly for unit preparations and burn activities to have minimal to no ground disturbing actions. Lastly, I just wanted to say where we're headed for the YOLO PBA. We are going to be working on continuing outreach, finding out what the community needs from the PBA and how we can best serve it, holding meetings, putting on trainings, and creating a newsletter. We're going to continue recruiting members to increase the capacity of the PBA and working to identify landowners wanting to implement prescribed fire on their property. And overall, we're going to continue to build capacity and education to safely implement prescribed fire in YOLO County. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, there will be a link to the PBA's website in the chat. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. All right, I'm going to pause for a minute in case there are questions for Bailey. All right. We are now going to turn it over to Tracy Kettleman for a bit of facilitated discussion on everything we have just heard about. So Tracy, you ready?
I'm ready. Thanks, Karen. So thanks, everybody. I think that was a fantastic introduction to prescribed fire and how we could use prescribed fire in Solano County and how it's being used in other areas around here. And so what we wanted to do now was open up the conversation, because we've touched on this a little bit in the meetings over the last year of, is this something that we do want to be promoting in Solano County or not? And if so, how? And what if there's interest out of this conversation, then we thought we'd set up a special meeting for those who are interested to dive more deeply into it and how we would do that work here in Solano and what it might look like. So want to open it up to all of you. You just heard a lot of really great information. Tori kicked it off, giving us that background information on what prescribed fire is. And then Damon shared about the cultural fire perspective. Kenny then talked about air quality and the kind of permits you need from air quality. And Bailey wrapped it up talking about the Yolo County Prescribed Burn Association, which is right next door. And I also threw in a couple of links about CAL FIRE. As Karen mentioned, Miguel just came off a fire, so he wasn't able to do a presentation, but he's here to answer questions and contribute to the conversation. So opening it up to all of you, what did you think of all that? Any insights, questions, comments? Just go ahead if you want to either raise your hand using the raise hand function or wave your hand, or if there's not a lot, just speak up and let us know what you think. Don't be shy.
Hey, Tracy, it's David.
Hey, David, go ahead.
So I'll start off and I'll offer my very biased opinion. I participated in the Yellow Burn out at the Hammerness Ranch. Had a great deal of fun. Brought my 17-year-old son and one of his best friends who both aspire to be firefighters someday. But in my early fire service life, going out and performing prescribed fires was part of a proactive practice in Solano County, to where fire was used to prevent wildfires in the Green Valley, Rockville, and Cordia area extensively over the years. And because people changed, people didn't like smoke, people didn't like the threat of fire, those practices went away probably sometime in the very early 1990s. If you go through those same areas where prescribed fire was once used, today, those areas are largely tremendously overgrown with brush and invasive species. And if there was a wildfire in that area today, it would be tremendous. So I absolutely not only support the concept of prescribed fire, but I hope we get started soon with doing these types of activities. So that's my very biased opinion.
Thanks, David, for kicking that off. Don't be shy, you guys. I think a lot of you know each other here. Go ahead, Matt.
I guess I have two questions. The first is, are we seeing prescribed fire practitioners more available due to the recent changes in the law and the changes in the liability element there? I know we are in a relatively isolated circumstance of doing our prescribed burning, but I'm kind of curious about the broader association between the public-private partnership that the changes in that liability policy have. And then secondly, is anybody aware of any work being done on the sort of matching up the commonalities amongst cultural burn and prescribed fire burn? Normally when we go into these scenarios, whether it's under, a CEQA document or something like that, one of the things I find that's not a lot of research on is the common elements, whether it's seasonality or moisture conditions or some of those others that we use on the fire science side that may or may not be common to the cultural burn side. And I'd be interested to know if there's kind of a standard operating procedures that share common characteristics of prescribed fire.
Well, why don't we start with that latter question? Damon, are you up for talking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had the opportunity to be able to participate in both really heavy duty prescriptions, and I mean to the T, to the code. And the cultural burn was very reminiscent of a traditional prescriptive burn. But I've also had the other side of the ladder where you're burning something and it could be a spot treatment because of medicinal plants like redbud. So like I said, each individual geographic area And then also the fuels that are there could have a magnitude of different results as well as the outcomes that are there. So it's up to the individual practitioners when they're actually doing this. Oftentimes they're burning in early season and late season, like I said, because of the receptivity of the individual fuels or the reason why they're doing it. It's kind of funny because I mentioned it in my presentation. I've seen them to the point where people are in blue jeans with basic necessities that are there to fight these fires and to go ahead and put good fire on the lands. And I've also seen, especially in Robinson Rancheria up there, where every single cultural elder has, all of the certification tracks for incident command system all the way through, and they're trying to get their burn boss certification, and they have all full PPE, full hand tools, complements, as well as resources available in case the fire did get out of compliance to be able to see there. And they're monitoring not only temperatures, conditions, and environment, but also doing the documentation even above and beyond what they're required to do. Because they want to be a good steward to the land and to be able to see year-to-year transmissions and data, so they actually are data driven and not just off of basic observations. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Anybody else want to answer that? Any of our other speakers? So I would add that I think it's important to note that of the recent legislation and the direction that the state is going is that the state recognizes cultural fire practitioners as the equivalent of a California certified burn boss, and a California certified burn boss is quite a few hoops to jump through. It's not a simple process to become a certified burn boss. So I think that's an important recognition of the level of experience the cultural burners have, and that's being recognized by the state. And the other point, the distinction that I notice, and this is just my own personal experience, is that a lot of times when we're doing prescribed fire, not cultural burning, sometimes we're doing it because we want to get black on the ground, right? We want to get black acres to be preventing potential fuels for an upcoming fire season. And I haven't seen that so much in cultural burns. Cultural burns are usually more ecologically or culturally motivated. And so they may not burn in some of those windows where we might be doing, us non-traditional folks might be doing a burn. So again, that's my own personal experience. That does not reflect any organization or any agency, but just what I've seen in California the last couple of years. So going back to your first question about resources, Tori or Bailey, do you want to speak to that availability of more resources in the last few years? Or both of you?
I can start. We're definitely seeing kind of a lag right now, but we're also seeing that we're getting a lot more certified burn bosses coming out of the program now that it's kind of it's still a lot of hoops to jump through, but it's a little bit more streamlined. So we're starting to see a lot of people come out of that at this point. I think it is going to take us a little bit to kind of get to where we need to be with how many certified burn bosses we want to have and all that. But I'm definitely seeing like we're on the upswing of it, I think. So yeah, that's kind of what I know about that kind of lack of certified burn boss, and they're coming. We're getting there.
Bailey, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, what Tori said is absolutely true. I do not come from a fire background, and I'm just getting into this world, and it looks like there's just a lot of movement within the fire agency world and outside of it that is opening up these pathways for people to become trained all the way up to a burn boss. So the interest is there. I think it's kind of with, as we all become more aware of the severe wildfires and climate change, and now legislation is starting to catch up. It's on an upward trajectory, and there are a lot of people who have already started that process to there's the CAREX program, which certifies people as burn bosses. So it's happening. But like Tori said, we're in a little bit of a gap right now, but it definitely is working that way for there to be more professional burn bosses available.
And I thought it was cool to see when we did this YOLO burn over at Hammerness Ranch last month that, you know, Bailey and the RCD staff did a lot of the work up front in terms of the permitting and gathering the data. And then we brought in a trainee burn boss from Yochadihi, and all those folks were working under our certified burn boss. So it helped like limit the work he had to do specifically so he could spread his certified burn boss energy a little bit further. And I'm seeing that a lot. You know, a lot of people are really advancing in that process. As Tori said, we've got a little lag, but there are a lot of people who are really coming up through the through our network who are getting those skills. So that's been inspiring to see for me. Other comments and questions? We've got another 10 minutes. What did you think about what you saw, what you heard here today? And about
Tracy, this is
Go
Dave
for
Markey. Just wanted to remind folks too that, and it's been mentioned, but the images are showing like wide open oak woodlands with grass being burned underneath. And there is a lot of that in Solano County, certainly, and the surrounding counties, but there's also a lot of fairly dense oak woodlands. There's, you know, mixed hardwood, softwood kind of forest, conifer forest. And we need to be really recognizing that prescribed burning is a tool. It's not the only tool. And oftentimes that treatments need to be done in conjunction with prescribed fire or in as part of the overall scheme to reduce, if you're going for reducing fire risk. And I've been involved with the work that has been done down in the Moraga Orinda area with the Moraga Orinda Fire District. And you know, there's a lot of fuel breaks being put in across the Bay Area right now in various places. They've been one of the leaders in doing that. But that was the initial, their initial treatments were manual treatments of woody fuels, removing, you know, some of the dense trees, removing some of the dead and dying trees, that sort of thing. And now they're maintaining those fuel breaks by using prescribed fire. And so I think it's important to recognize that there would be relatively few places, except maybe open rangeland, where prescribed fire by itself is the tool that you would use. Just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. And Damon, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but I know that's something you guys have been doing, right? You've been going out and treating, and then fire comes later.
Absolutely. So, and you folks hit it right on the head. Every single time when it comes to, there is no golden ticket, there is no perfect treatment option. So you're going to have to employ a magnitude of different tactics. It's there. We just finished up one in a community. It's a brand new community for the tribe of the Wintun Nation, where we had a grant opportunity for mastication and removal of trees from the LNU Lightning Complex. And that's 100% right. It was not only mastication, tree removal, chipping of materials, burning off the piles themselves. We also do a specific area where we can't do other treatment options there because of the sensitivity of smoke and the risk of wildfire. So we actually bring out the herd management tactics that go into the areas. And so we employ local herdsmen and women to go ahead and come out and reducing those overall fuels and creating that ladder fuels where you're tearing out and removing a lot of that biomass so you wouldn't have a crown fire. And you folks are 100% right, is that you've got to use the tools to the landscape that you have that's presenting in front of you. And then you have to do a follow-up. So you might initially come in and remove and thin the overall canopy, only to find out that you're not going to be able to broadcast and you're going to have to burn those areas off. And that creates some of the issues as well, because you're worried about sterilization of the soils or compaction of the soils with large equipment. And that always comes into play as well. So you really have to be a steward to the land and see long-term results coming from it, and then be able to realize that there is no perfect way and perfect solution, just kind of being really flexible on Mother Nature and the environment. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. And perhaps this is what you meant already, David. I missed something you said. But in the Canyon Country to the west of Vacaville, where it's now just a tremendous amount of regrowth, I would assume that you would have to have fire lines cut by bulldozers or something in order to define an area for a prescribed burn. Is that right? Or can you do it at a certain season of the year where you're more likely to have a good outcome?
Did you want to answer that, David? Or if not, maybe Tori?
I'm not real sure.
Oh,
I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
I guess I would answer that with a question, which is, you know, what would be your intent of underburning those areas? You know, that if you're talking about the areas that have recently been burned in the LNU complex and some other local, you know, smaller fires, I would wonder what the purpose is of you going in and wanting to underburn. But in the larger question, oftentimes fuel breaks or breaks in the fuel, I wouldn't call it a fuel break, but breaks in the fuel are used to make burning units more discreet. That doesn't necessarily have to be done with a bulldozer. It can be done, it can be something as narrow as a 5-foot line down to bare mineral soil. So I think you're kind of mixing. If you're bringing bulldozers in to clear things, then I think you're constructing a fuel break, and you know, not necessarily for the purposes of burning the unit, but I would think that'd be more of a long-term thing, that you're creating a fuel break that you want to maintain.
Actually, we would find it too destructive to have something like that happening anyway. But the main thing is that the phytophilic plants that have come up after the LNU complex fire have now gotten to the point that they have such a huge fuel load that we're going to have a fire like nothing we've had before in the 50 years I've been there, because it was a more open parkland before, and now it's an impassable thicket with a lot of ceanothus and other plants that have come, mountain mahogany and things that are just highly flammable. So it's just to reduce fuel load and try to reduce density.
Tori,
Yeah,
do you want to take that? Let's pass it on to Tori.
Okay.
So yeah, we, in the prescribed burn association world, so like PBAs, we like to use features that are already on the landscape. So if you had a road going through your property, we will try to like use the road systems to allow us to burn off, kind of chunk off the property to burn off that way. I work in Napa County and Sonoma County. We have a lot of those similar fires and similar situations where everything's just regrowing. We have a lot of sprouting species in this region. And they're all kind of getting like taller than me, so like 7-8 feet tall. And yeah, that is a question that everyone's asking right now. In certain cases, you could use fire as a first entry pass through. Fire would determine what would stay and what would go. You as a person don't get to choose that. That would only be in very certain circumstances. You have to make sure that you have good lines around your lines being roads or whatever else. Maybe there's a dozer line that was put in with the suppression efforts of the past wildfires, whatever. But that in very certain situations, you could use fire as a first entry tool to kind of determine what's going to stay or go. A lot of times in those situations, we would want to do a pre-treatment, so manual or mechanical, coming through and thinning out, choosing what we want, putting in strategic hand lines here and there, creating shaded field breaks to work off of, that type of thing, and then come through with the burn afterwards. Or even come through with pile burning first, and then to just reduce some of that fuel loading before you do a broadcast burn. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You can, but yeah, it's kind of very, in forestry and fire, the answer ends up being, it depends a lot, and it's going to very much depend on where you're at, what's your topography, what do we have going on that site.
Thanks, Tori. So before we
you.
get into our last question with Jorge, we've got a poll that Karen's gonna put up now, because we want to know out of this how who's interested in continuing this conversation. So Karen, why don't you go ahead and launch the poll? And this is not anonymous because we want to know who's interested if you want to continue to have this conversation. And while that's happening, Jorge, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. And
Go
thank
for
you, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I too have a little one, and so I'm on daddy duty on Mondays, and so here I am. So sorry, but I was able to tune in on the presentations, and thank you. Really appreciate the regional approach to this, because it is a regional matter, right? I'm with Catholic Charities Disaster Services Program Manager, Jorge Zavala, and we too are in Yolo and Solano. And so I have a meeting on Friday with director and deputy director to talk about our strategic plan updates, vision for this type of program and outreach efforts, things like that. And something that was weighing heavy a little bit on me, and y'all touched on it a little bit earlier, was enrolling people, property owners in these efforts, right? And looking at the outskirts of places maybe that have fuel loads that need to be addressed. I have two questions. So is there a zone mapping that you have available? So let's say I want to engage the Catholic parishes and say, hey, if you live in this zone, you need to participate in this program. Make sure that your fuel reduction is low, right? That's one question. And then what can we do as potential partners in doing the outreach and education within the community to just get informed and educated? Because this was very valuable information for me, and would love to be able to share it with others. Thank you.
Thanks. So when you talk about zones, do you mean like areas with higher fire risk versus?
Yeah, just thinking about properties, we don't have to get into the weeds, and then I love a follow-up conversation, but yeah, high risk areas. So like the outskirts, you can just follow the fire zone and what it decimated, and look at that area, right? Like the outskirts of Vacaville and others, but anything that I should really prioritize or some sort of zones. Thank you.
Well, I would assume the CWPP is going to be the first place to really look at that information. And that's, I assume, coming out in the next couple of months. I don't know, Matt or Karen, if you want to speak to that.
Montiel is actually here. A quick update on that.
Yeah, so before I get into the update, I'll answer that question about the map. So yeah, the CWPP will have a map that designates the communities or areas within Solano that are designated as high risk for wildfire. I wouldn't suggest using it for like just one property or a parcel, but definitely you can target communities with that map. All right, so now for the update, if I'm not getting into or should I let Jorge's question be answered first?
Let's wait on the update. And
Yeah.
CWPP is Community Welfare Protection Plan. So I think that, Jorge, that will have some good information for you. And then follow up with Karen and Matt, because I think this is what the Fire Safe Council is about, is like, how do we share resources and all that? And then if we keep moving forward on prescribed fire, that would be also something you could help share resources about. So with that, Karen, do you want to end the poll? It looks like there's a lot of interest. Looks like we have some people that are interested and 2 maybes. And that didn't include any of us who are co-hosts because we can't vote. So there's probably all of us too. So that's great news. So Karen will follow up with y'all on that with an email. And
yes, thank you. And if you know of anybody else who should be a part of future discussions about prescribed fire in Solano County, please send them our way. You can, I'll put my email address in the chat box. And Robin, I see your hands up.
Or that the local fire districts are included in any conversation related to prescribed fire.
Yeah, so of course. All right. Tracy, were there any outstanding questions that we were needing to get to?
Don't think so. I think it's back to you.
All right. So we've got a little bit of time left, and our kind of usual updates roundup is up next. Let me double check my list of who is around. So I know that actually Montiel had just been unmuted. So Montiel, do you want to come back for that community wildfire protection plan update?
Yes, of course. Yeah, so good evening and thank you for your time and attention. My name is Montiel from SWC Environmental Consultants. We've been assisting Solano County with their first community wildfire protection plan. We started last fall, and we're pleased to announce that today we released the draft plan to the planning team so they can review it. They'll have until the 4th to return it back to us with any suggestions or comments. And then we're looking to meet up with the planning team again on the week of August 14th. And shortly thereafter, we're looking to release the plan for public comment. And yeah, I think that wraps up the CWPP update. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Montiel. I know that David Stevens had a brief update for Pleasant Valley Fire Safe Council.
All right. I'm gonna bring up my notes here. Just give me a second. So there was a couple things I wanted to bring up. Paul Dolan had actually brought to my attention that KCRA is doing a series of wildfire safety programs, and the next one's coming up is Wednesday evening at 7:30. I actually watched the one that they had posted from July 14th, and it's about a 30-minute segment. It talks about how the National Weather Service has developed a new resource that's called Particularly Dangerous Situations, and it's used in conjunction with red flag warnings. So if a region is under red flag warnings and they're going to experience winds in excess of 30 miles an hour, daytime humidity below 9%, overnight humidity below 31%, they get this additional warning called a PDS. And that area is essentially under a heightened level of red flag warning. But they talked about other things on a daily basis. KCRA is also going to be offering things like a fire threat index, and that's available on their website. And it's going to just talk about conditions, fuel moisture, wind, and humidity are their 3 criteria that they use for the fire index. And they're going to post that daily just so people can make good decisions when they're going to be out doing mowing or weed abatement type work or other activities in the community, and just help increase people's awareness. Let's see. As I said, I did participate in the Hammerness Prescribed Fire event, and that was a very wonderful opportunity. Enjoyed a great deal, learned a lot, very, very positive experience. And then lastly, a couple things. So over the weekend, we had 3 folks that had worked event in Pleasants Valley, and part of the event was to promote pet fire safety, which was July 15th. And under the brutal conditions that we experienced, I gratefully appreciate those folks going out and putting in the time and meeting with the community. And they had some great interactions with the public. So I'd like to thank them. And then lastly, Pleasants Valley is now officially recognized as a 501c3. We've completed our 501c3 process. We're wrapping up just the last final items. We do have a bank account set up now, and we are now able to accept donations. So thank you for letting me give an update.
Thank you, David. That's great news. Congratulations. All right. Moving through those of you that I know have updates. Tanya Meyer with Yolo County RCD. You got updates.
Yes, just a brief one. It does pertain to Solano County. But our Fire Safe Council meets once a month, but since our CWPP is done, folks decided they didn't want to meet every month. We didn't have to. So we did not have a meeting in June, which means we have an action-packed July Fire Safe Council meeting. That'll be on the 26th of July. And we have a speaker from the California Insurance Commission who covers, she covers Yolo County, but also Solano County. So folks are invited to join us for that. And if you're not on the my email list, then let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. And the other thing we'll be talking about is some of you may know that after the LNU complex, the County of Yolo was given $800,000 to do a feasibility study of a siren system for the Pleasant Valley Winters, West Winters area. And without doing the study, emergency experts said that it wouldn't be feasible. So the Yolo County Board of Supervisors on the 25th is going to vote, hopefully thumbs up, to reallocate that money to do actual CWPP projects. And those will be managed by the RCD and advised by the Yolo County Fire Safe Council. So those will be veg management projects. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Tanya.
And I'm going to put, because I'm going to put my email in the chat. So folks who want to be added to my list, please just send me a direct email because I'm at home and I'll give it a shot too. Thank you.
All right. And I see we do have some fire personnel, some public works folks in our audience here. Does anyone else have updates to share?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Those who don't know me, my name is Paul Dawn. I'm the prevention captain for Vacaville District. Just an update. Hey guys, fire season has started. Southern California has 3 major fires going on in Riverside County that are more than one operational period. One is at 7,600 acres. There's a fire in Yellowstone or in Yosemite, and there's another one in Stanislaus National Forest. So this is the first group of major fires for the season. Last 30 days, we've had a series of vegetation fires around Solano County. This weekend, we ended up having a car fire, which spread into the vegetation at 505 and Allendale Road. So we're now starting to get some more significant fires every week. For Vacaville District, LE 100 inspections have been going on. We've got 35 completed so far. We're covering the areas of English Hills and Steiger Hill Road. Solano County is starting a pilot program to provide reflective address signs at no cost to those who live in the SRA within very high and high hazard areas. It's first come, first serve and funded by a grant. There'll be more information to follow. CAL FIRE has done, I don't know if you're aware of it, CAL FIRE has extended the fire hazard severity zone increases through the SRA or the commentary period a 3rd time. Additional public comments can be made until August 9th now. In 2024, we're going to see a change to the LE 100 inspections. There'll be a new added thing called Zone 0. Basically establishes a non-flammable zone from 0 to 5 feet. And then you continue on with your 30-foot and 100-foot zone levels. In addition to that, one of the things that's going to change in 2024 is the use of bark, wood chips, and other flammable woods for landscaping materials. For new construction, that's going to be suspended. It's going to be recommended that you use rock or green plant or something else. It's expected that in 2025 or a little later, that code will change for existing homes with bark and wood chips. One of the big things that was coming out of the Santa Rosa fire in 2017 was there were a lot of people who had homes with wood chips, bark, that kind of thing around there for their ornamental gardens or their landscaping. And that just created a dry bed of fuels, which ignited a lot of houses. And that is all I have right now for Vacaville District. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
All right, thank you for those updates. That was a lot of very interesting information, especially about the Zone 0. And where should people go for more information about signage?
You can find that on the CAL FIRE website. There's a new handout that is being handed out right now. It just came out at the beginning of this month. Has a lot of the information. And just for those of you who are in information, CAL FIRE is changing some of the ways that they're presenting information for fire prevention programs. They are getting less into publications and handing out piles of publication materials, and to going to a single thing, basically utilizing a QR code. Anybody that they talk to, they're going to show either a booklet or number sheets of paper that are going to have, okay, for preparing your home for wildfire, for creating an escape plan, those kind of things. And there'll be a QR code for each one of those. And basically it will lead you back to their website. This is something that we're really going to see kick in next year. Okay.
Good to know. The days of attending tabling events and coming home with bags full of pamphlets are soon to be gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I honestly think that's a bad idea. I mean, you get to when you're talking about trying to educate the public, handing them a piece of paper that they can look at later on and review. They're going to remember that versus a QR code. So that's just my opinion.
I mean, it's a tricky one. I would love to debate that with y'all as I do this outreach and work with people that have limited technological skills. But yeah, I was trying to get people to sign up for Alert Solano today at an outreach event and scanning the QR code and showing them how to do that. And it's a little tricky, but the trains left the station, and that's where we're at. But will there be, just a quick question, will there be also printed documents for those folks that have limited technological skills still available?
I think I had a meeting with the CAL FIRE pre-fire guy over at St. Helena's headquarters office. And the state is basically moving to, they want to print less materials and basically get people to look the information up more online. And if they want the material, then they can print it up at home. So that ability is still there. It's just, it sounds like they're trying to shift some of their prevention material to be more online than physical handouts.
Solid.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Do we have any additional updates?
I have a quick update I can give from Solano County Public Works. We have Cantaloupe Road closed between Steiger Hill and English Hills, and we anticipate opening it, barring any complications with construction, on July 29th.
Okay. July 29th. Coming up soon. Thank you. Any further updates? All right. We've got about our time up. So I'm gonna just go ahead and share our closing announcements. And if there's anybody who would like to stick on longer with questions or additional discussion, we'll have a few minutes for that. But just keep in mind that we are back to the third Monday schedule that had been set earlier in the year. So the next meeting coming up will be Monday, August 21st, 5:30 to 7. The topic is to be announced. Keep an eye on your inbox for further information about those about that meeting. The recording, slides, notes, resources shared at this meeting will be available on the Solano Fire Safe Council website. That is in the chat box. If you just scroll up a few, it'll be there, solanofsc.org. So you can check in the meetings section for recordings and all prior meeting information. There will also be putting in email addresses if you have questions, would like to get in touch with meeting suggestions, any feedback, anybody you think should be involved in prescribed fire discussions, go ahead and send us an email. We'll be happy to share that along. And lastly, the final reminder is to please share all of the information that we've been discussing here today with anybody that you think would be interested in it, that you work with or serve on a regular basis. The idea behind this Fire Safe Council was to have it be a forum for collaboration and enhanced communication within the county. So please don't let this information end here, and share it with those who need to get these resources. That's all that we have. I'll be dropping some email addresses into the chat box. And if there's any further questions or comments, please go ahead and unmute, raise your hand. Have a good rest of your evening and stay safe and cool, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everybody.